Defense lawyer Sipho Ramosepele has accused state witness Mthokozisi Thwala and those present in the house when Senzo Meyiwa was shot dead of fabricating the story of what really happened that night.
Ramosepele, who is representing accused 1 and 2, wrapped up his cross-examination in the North Gauteng High Court. 5 men are accused of murdering the Bafana Bafana soccer star who was shot at Kelly Khumalo's mother's home in 2014.
Thwala, a close friend of Meyiwa, witnessed the shooting and claims 2 intruders came in demanding cell phones and money. Earlier, we spoke to SABC's senior reporter Chriselda.
On what the defense is basically contending is that Mthokozisi Thwala is lying on the stand and is not giving the true version of what took place on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. As you correctly point out, Sipho Ramosepele basically saying that the version that Thwala is giving is not in line with real life situations, in that they questioned how it was possible. For example, you would have heard in his evidence in chief, Thwala basically said that Longwe Thwala, who was also inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed, was one of the first people to stand up and manage to push one of the intruders and then flee the house. So the defense is basically questioning to say, how was it possible when you had 2 of these intruders, one carrying a firearm and the other carrying a knife? Why is it that they did not, try to harm Longwe Thwala or even try to stop him from exiting the house? Let's take a listen to one of those exchanges inside court.
Both the first and the second intruders do not pursue or chase after Longwe as he runs out of the house, correct?
Ufakazi bakho ke futhi ukuthi noma kulo wokuqala noma nalo wesibili akekho nje kubona noba bona bobabili abamsukela noma bamjaha uLongwe ukuthi angaphumi endlini.
Yebo akekho bamjaha wena.
Yes, they did not pursue him.
Further to say, the Iman, is that the events that were described by Thwala, as you would recall as well, the first witness that was inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed, who also took the stand prior to Thwala, you'd recall, was Senzo Meyiwa's close friend, Tumelo Madlala, basically saying that there was nothing that is being referred to as bravado by Ramosepele that he says that Longwe Thwala did, because in fact those events did not unfold as he says. Let's take a listen.
My suggestion to you will be that this apparent act of bravado from Longwe Thwala did not happen.
Engizokusho-ke kuwena mina ke ukuthi lesenzo lesike sokuthi abe nesibindi ke uLongwe ukuthi into leyo engazange yenzeke.
Angazi ukuthi ufuna ukuthi ngize ngichaze kanjani ngoba ngakutshela into eyenzeka leyo. uLongwe yena ngiyombiza azele la chazeleni ukuthi wadlula kanjani ebantwini kodwa uLongwe lapha wadlula ebantwini wadlula kumuntu.
I don't know how you want me to explain it, but I'm saying to you that is what happened. You will then have to call Longwe and let him describe as to how he got past the people. But Longwe went past those people.
Well, Iman, we also heard the defense, Sipho Ramosepele, say that one of the witnesses who deposed the statement also said that he heard a commotion coming from the home of Kelly Khumalo's mother. This is the crime scene, and that this was before the gun had gone off. We also heard, Thwala, Mthokozisi Thwala, basically saying that, after he had jumped into the yard of the neighbors, when he had jumped back, he found Senzo Meyiwa lying on the floor, and he had lifted his T-shirt and basically saw where the gunshot wound was, and he was handed a towel to close off that wound. But when they went outside, after there was a discussion to call the police as well as an ambulance, he had heard part of the conversation, share utterances that Meyiwa was still alive, and that was when they decided then to rush him to the hospital. So Ramosepele has concluded his cross-examination of Mthokozisi Thwala, and then tomorrow the lawyer representing accused number 3, Advocate Charles Mnisi, will then begin his cross-examination, also trying to poke holes in that version, because you'd note that the defense has contended that there were no intruders inside the house on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed, and it must have been some scuffle that had taken place there that ultimately led to his death.
And it's interesting in listening to that exchange between Ramosepele and Mthokozisi Thwala, we're finally getting into the detail where you tease out, you slow down the moments. What is happening? What is the detail, so that you can really analyze who did what, and I suppose for the judge's purposes, begin to understand the fuller and deeper picture here. We haven't been able to see Mthokozisi Thwala's face. How did he react? How would you describe how he reacted to his cross-examination?
Well, initially, Iman, at the start of his evidence in chief, there were times when his voice would really lower, and some of the defense counsel would ask him to speak up a bit louder. But he would say then that, sometimes his voice would dip because he's referring to an incident in which his best friend was killed, and that, he would get emotional sometimes. But today, he seemed very confident, about what he was saying, even under cross-examination, even while the defense was trying to poke holes and suggest that the version that he was giving was simply not true, that there were no intruders in the house on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. But he seemed very calm today, quite confident in answering those questions where he sought clarity. In fact, in some instances where Ramosepele had, made some statements which turned out not to be true, or to suggest that there were certain statements that he made about what had happened after Longwe Thwala had stood up from the chair and basically forced his way out of the house. That is the version, of course, that is being given by Thwala, and the previous witness who was also in the house, Tumelo Madlala. He seemed very calm, and also tried to point out to places where the defense had in fact got it wrong in terms of what they said he had initially said about what happened inside that house. Some statements also, during the state prosecutor advocate, George Beloy, in that he corrected some of the statements that he had previously made. Some of the statements that, Thwala had made previously suggested that Longwe Thwala at some point had managed to get hold of this so-called gun by these intruders and dropped it. He then went on to rectify it and say, in fact, it was Longwe Thwala who was the first person to dash out of the house, this by trying to push through the first intruder that came into the house, who was carrying a gun. And he described that intruder as the one with the dreadlocks. So, we're going to see quite a lot more of the defense trying to poke holes in this testimony tomorrow when the defense for accused number 3 begins his cross-examination of Mthokozisi Thwala.